Okay, I got all the finishing tapes on. I just went over this wingtip bow finishing tape one more time with some polybrush. I got all the finishing tapes on, polybrush down, all ironed out and everything, all looking beautiful. Got all my inspection port grommets down on them and covers over them, and all looking just beautiful as a newborn baby. I got a new grommet down there on the fuel drain. Of course, grommets down there and doublers down there on the wing root. We got the finished grommets over the jury strut attach point, the pitot tube, and where the aileron cables come through. Grommet or a doubler patch or whatever over where the tie down bracket goes. Got it all trued up and trimmed up and everything around the landing light. Got my grommets fit up around the wing strut attach points there where they attach to the spars. Everything looks good. Looks like we're all done, ready to send it to the paint booth, right? Well, not quite. Now I get to burn holes in my brand new fabric. So if you remember all of those holes that I punched in the false spars here, now I get to burn those out and put SeaPlane grommets on them. So there's still a lot of work to do there. I got to glue down all the SeaPlane grommets. I'm going to put them on each one of these holes that I punched out earlier in the false spars. I've got to put one here in the wingtip and one here on the wingtip on each side of these ribs. Anyway, we're not done yet. So I got an old soldering iron out here with a pointy tip on it, and I'll just go down through each one of these holes. And that's ugly. Well, I got a strong light down underneath it. Well, that helps be able to see these holes. Alright, that heartache is done. It's hard putting holes in that fabric after you're getting it all done, but it is a requirement. Polyfiber requires you to put drain holes in the fabric. Their STC allows for you to just take a small soldering iron or something and just melting holes in it every so often, just leave them like that. They also have some fiber grommet that you can put on there with doilies over the top of those, or they have metal washers that you can use. What we're going to use here is a SeaPlane grommet. You see, it's plastic. It's got a cup over it. The drain hole is in the back here. They fit over these holes like this, and airflow over this then creates a Venturi effect inside that and helps draw moisture out of there. So I'll put these on each one of these holes that I just burned in there. But first I'm going to go ahead and get a razor blade and go over those. Some of those got a little bit of burnt fabric and stuff sticking out of them. And if you leave that on there, moisture collects on those and it just grows moss and mold and creates a nuisance. Anyway, these get glued on with poly tack, and then we'll put a doily over the top of those to finish them out. I got my first grommet. I got it coated with poly tack. I just put it on there over that hole and give it a little spin around, and then make sure it's pointed backwards in the flow of the airflow there. And that's it. Oh, it's been a little while since I've done this and I forgot. Now I remember. But it's easier, makes it better if you have a pair of needle nose pliers or a pair of forceps or something like that to grab a hold of those with. Doesn't matter if you get it on there perfect the first time. You want to make a little spin on it anyway, and make sure and get that poly tack down good and even. Well, that's pretty much it. We just keep doing that with the rest of those holes. Now, if you're not doing a seaplane, you sure don't need seaplane grommets. In fact, you don't need any grommets at all. According to the polyfiber manual, you can just poke holes in here every so often. You do have to open it up so it can ventilate out, but what the seaplane grommets do, I've got pretty good sized holes in there. They say a minimum of 1/4 inch holes. That's what these are, pretty close to 1/4 inch. But what these seaplane grommets do is, I've said it before, they create a venturi over that and they'll help suck the moisture out from inside the wing. But again, you don't need them on there unless you're doing a seaplane. So now the hard part of this begins, and that's fitting doilies over each one of those, covering those up. And fortunately for this, I've got the doilies already pre-cut. I bought pre-cut doilies for that, so I don't have to cut them all out individually, but it's still a pain in the butt fitting those on there. You got to put poly brush around each one of these, let it set to make a bed, and then put more poly brush around it and fit the grommet to it. And you actually have to slit the grommet, cut it so that the doily, so that it fits down over the grommet and fits down over this opening here. So it's not just simple, but it finishes this up nicely when it's done. Well, now I just got to wait for the polytack to make sure it dries and cures, as if I put poly brush on that now, the poly brush will dry faster and the solvents in the polytack won't have a chance to get out. They'll get sealed in there and they won't harden up like it should. So I'll let that sit. Well, it's almost 6 o'clock now, so we'll sit that overnight. Then tomorrow I'll go ahead and start putting the grommets on there. I'm not going to go out and get any more sand. I got enough sand yesterday to put my paint booth on. I still need several loads of sand to put on top of the chambers for the septic system once I get those put down. Yesterday I went out and got 2 loads of sand that have very little rock in it or anything, nice fine soft sand to put down on top of the pad that we made last year that had a lot of sharp rocks and stuff in it. Well, I've got this inflatable paint booth with a vinyl bottom on it, and I wanted it on something that was soft, so we'll put a tarp down on the ground, put this blow-up doll on there and blow it up. And I don't know how that's going to work out because they're not weatherproof and we've got rain for the foreseeable future. So it's supposed to be storm today and tonight and tomorrow with rain and wind, so I wasn't planning on doing anything today. But I wasn't planning on doing anything today anyway, because yesterday one of the seals went out on one of my rear axle flanges. So I've got gear grease coming out of one of the wheels. I've got to clean that up and fix a new gasket on that axle and put it back together and put new grease in that differential. So we've got enough grease in the differential to keep running. I did a lot of work hauling that sand. It's 16 miles over mostly old logging roads and stuff in my dump trailer, and I'm getting about 3.5 yards at a time, so it's not easy on that old truck. So anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and work on this trailing edge here of this aileron rib now. I've got that finish tape right there that I've got to do something with there, and that'll finish this out. I might have to turn the wing over to finish that, but I can get it glued down on this side now anyway. So work on that, and then I think I'm done for the day. Came up here last night and did a little check on these grommets to make sure they're curing properly, and then I took one of the little dollar patches, the doilies, and kind of laid out on this grommet here. This is the outboard one on the outboard section of the wing. Anyway, I laid a doily on it, dollar patch on it, and figured out where I wanted to make my slit and how to fit it on there, and I've kind of got that laid out. So I went ahead and tried putting one on here to see how it was going to work, how it was going to fit. I may need to adjust my slit just a little bit because it's just a little bit unbalanced, got a little bit more of the fabric back here than I do out in the front, but all in all it looks pretty good. So I came up here a little bit ago and put my first bed of poly brush around each one of these grommets. Well, now I'll go ahead and slit a few more of those, and might as well get busy and get them installed. kind of an odd shape to try to fit around, and these are not pre-shaped or anything. They're bare fabric. They haven't been pre-coated with polybrush or anything like that, so they fit pretty easy. But again, trying to get that shape in there and get all the air out from underneath it, kind of a challenge. One good reason not to put SeaPlane grommets on. Alright, well, only 21 more of those to go. So I'm working on putting these doilies covers over these grommets, SeaPlane grommets drains. This was one I did last night, and I come out this morning and took the iron and smoothed that out, and that turned out pretty good. And I did this one just today, and it's a lot of work, and it's not turning out too good. I figure once I get the iron to it, it'll straighten out pretty good. So I took a lot of work getting that down like that even, and so I did several of them like that, and they're all pooched up in one place or another, not glued down very good. So then, after fighting with these for a while, I come up with a new plan. We'll see how that works. So all these grommets are kind of hard to get down right. Putting a patch on the fabric is pretty easy. You clean it up down to the fabric, either to the poly spray or poly brush. Put a little bit of reducer on it to soften it up. Maybe put a bed of poly brush on there. Slap your patch on there and squeeze it down with a brush to get the poly brush to come all the way through it. Let that set up a little bit and put another coat of poly brush on, and then poly spray and whatever finish coat you want. So piece of cake over just plain fabric. Putting it up over these grommets is a little different story, because these grommets stick up proud up above the fabric, and these ones for these handhole covers, these inspection covers like this, the round ones, are not too bad because they're not very thick and they taper pretty good around there, but they can still be a problem if you don't want them tented up all the way around here. What they recommend doing is putting the poly brush on there and then take a pencil and run around through here and get them down, and then go around the outside and do the same thing. What I did with these is I went ahead and put my doilies, my patches, over the top of the grommet and just glued it down on the inside here and run it all the way around with a pencil, but I had it like a popsicle stick, and then just let it sit until that cures up, and then I come back, put poly brush around the grommet itself and around the outside, and put the outside down, and that worked out pretty good. Like I said, these aren't too bad. These other style of inspection ports covers, grommets, are just a little bit different because they are taller and they have sharp edges on them. But I got those pretty good too without them being tinted or anything around there, and no bubbles underneath them, by doing it the same way. Oh, these things here are a whole different ball game, because they not only stand proud here above the fabric a little bit, so you've got that lip to come over, but then they come up into this dome, and so you have a convoluted shape there, and then it cuts off at that straight, and so the fabric wants to drop down. Well, you're going to wind up with too much fabric in places, so the only thing to do with that is to shrink it up a little bit, maybe with the iron. But what I started out doing was just trying to force these down and just working them with a stick until I got them to stick down pretty close. But you got to work on those a lot until the poly brush pretty much sets up, and then you can move to the next one. So what I started doing with these is I just put those on there, glued them down here from the scoop on the grommet back, and got those pushed down. Still have to pull the fabric in and gather it in to get it around here, keep it from tenting but and keeping any blisters out of there, any air bubbles out of there. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and let these sit for a while until that poly brush cures up, and then I come back and finish gluing those down here on the front portion of them. And there's going to be some extra fabric there, of course, but the iron will take care of that when we get that far. So anyway, these are looking a lot better like that. That looks like the way to do these. Probably nobody else in the world is going to watch these videos is going to put on SeaPlane grommets, but if you do, I think that's the way to do it. It's just going to take more time doing it that way. Actually, it was taking a lot of time to stand over each one of these individually and work them until they come down, but alright, we'll see how that works. I'm going to let all those set up for a while. Well, that, for all intents and purposes, finishes up that wing. At least this part of doing the wing. We still have to do the finish coats on it, but that is the last of the assembly of everything. I've got those SeaPlane grommets installed in there. What I think there was 23 of them. Anyway, those are all installed. Now, I've put these in before when I rebuilt the fuselage of the airplane. The fuselage didn't get very many in them. I think I had 2 or 3 in the fuselage, but I had all new control surfaces, tail surfaces, so both elevators, horizontal stabilizers, and the rudder all had several of these in them. And then I worked over one aileron and one flap, and both of those I put this type of drains in too. So I've done quite a few of them, and all of the ones I did before, I cut out the patches out of scrap polyfiber that I had left over. Well, I was kind of excited this time when I got to looking, and I found that they had these dollar patches, and they were pretty cheap. So I bought a couple packages of those, and I was going to get the doilies that go over these handhold covers too, but they didn't have any at Stoddard's. But they did have these dollar patches. Now they're a catalog item in Univair, and Stoddard's is a Univair distributor, so I'm sure that's where they get them from. But anyway, I was pretty excited to get those to use for this instead of having to sit down and cut out a whole bunch of these dollar patches and stuff. I was kind of unsure of them, so I used 2 of them here on the wing tip where I messed up and burned out those holes trying to make a rotator for the wing, and I had to cover those back up. And they worked out okay on those, but I noticed that the holes didn't shrink up on them when I went to tighten them up, when I put the iron over them to smooth them out. They stayed pretty loose. Now, the finishing tapes go over that, so it turns out to be not a big deal. And then I used some of them there on the wing root, where I put in grommets for the penetrations that are going to go in the wing root for the fuel system and stuff. I kind of had mixed feelings about them. I was glad they were there, but I was kind of wondering about them because they don't really act like polyfiber. In fact, when you get to looking at them, they almost look like cheap flannel out of cheap pajamas or something. But when I used them on here, then I was pretty disappointed with the way they worked. They went on, and of course, typical, they go on. We're going over a pretty convoluted shape there. We've got multiple shapes to go over, so it's going to be tough getting them anything to fit over them like that. I did it before with the polyfiber, and I didn't, I had to work them to get them to work, but this stuff just wasn't cooperating when I put it on. Well, this one I got on okay. It still had a little wrinkle on it. This one here has got a pretty good wrinkle on it. And then these others I was having more trouble with. Well, I thought no big deal, right? I'll just wait and use the iron on them and get them to go down with the iron, and I can heat shrink them in the places where there's too much material, like where it comes down over here and it pooched out pretty good right here. There's a lot of material there, and there's some wrinkles and stuff. I can use the iron and just heat shrink that. Actually, these first few I tried to put on and form them as I put them on, and then as I got farther down here, I would just put them on in the back and leave them on the front, and just leave them open on the front here, figuring I'd come back after this glue set up, the polybrush set up, and I could work the front of them in and get them to come down like that. Well, that wasn't working, and I got the iron out and warmed it up, and I tried to shrink it, and this stuff did not heat form worth a damn. I could not get it to shrink. I turned my iron up to 350 degrees, and I thought maybe my little hobby iron wasn't working anymore, because it did drop it the other day. So I took it over and found a piece of finishing tape and put the hobby iron on it, and boy, it just shrunk it right up. So this stuff just wouldn't shrink. It wouldn't heat form very well. So I wound up just taking this where it comes over this front here and it pooches out. I just wound up taking the scissors and making a slit in that to take up the extra material, and then overlapped them and glued them down. But even that was not working like polyfiber would, like this fabric here would if I was using it. So I almost tore all those off of there. Was gonna cut patches out of doilies out of fabric I've got. I was awful tempted to tear those out of there, but I think these will work. I've got them on there now, and they'll be okay. So anyway, I just put another coat of polybrush on them. We'll let that dry, and then we'll have to come back with the iron again and start cleaning up, and then I'll go over the whole wing with the iron again and see if there's any other spots that need to be smoothed out. Then this wing will be done. Then I'll just have to mask off the places we don't want the spray paint to go, get my paint booth set up. So the next step is to go to the paint booth.